And now let me ask this question. Have you ever used the internet to network? Yeah? Right? Go to a conference, you get a business card, hey, it was nice meeting you, let's get together, or hey, a friend of a friend of a friend of mine mentioned I should talk to you, right? It's pretty simple, right? Pretty easy to send somebody an email. You ever ask somebody his advice over email, over the internet? Okay? And what about the personal side of networking? You don't have to raise your hands. Okay? Why do you think there's been such an explosion of eHarmony and Match.com? I know, this is a business conference, I got that. But just for the moment, entertain me. Why do you think there's been such an explosion of these online dating sites? I'm sorry?
It's that simple. You do it from your own chair, from your own spot, from your time, whenever you want.
Okay.
You can do it whenever you want it,
So,
with the person you would like to know, whatever.
okay, so the simplicity, right? Everybody, quote unquote, everybody that I would be interested in at least, would have access to a computer. I don't have to put on my makeup. I don't have to put on my clothes. I don't have to do anything. I could sit at my computer and say, hey, John, how's it going? Nice to meet you, so on and so forth. Right? So it's simple. Why else? Here.
Everybody's pressed for time, and it's a heck of a lot faster.
Yeah, think about it. I used to live in Los Angeles. I got out alive. Thank you. And this is really funny. In the Los Angeles dating scene, when you meet somebody you like, and let's say you have a really nice dinner together, then you ask the question, where do you live? And this person gets a 2-letter acronym attached to them, GU or GD. Anybody want to guess? Geographically undesirable or geographically desirable? I kid you not, I'm not making this up. Okay? In a city of over 13 million people, it matters. So in the case of being pressed for time, if I want to meet somebody, whether professionally or personally, I don't have to invest any time on the freeway, in a traffic jam, losing my way, pulling out the map system, right? It's quite simple. And on top of that, if there is a time difference, 2, 3, 12 hours, again, there's no issue. We can talk simultaneously. It might be nighttime there and daytime here, but it works. Any other reasons why you think there's been such an explosion? We have one more question. The 5th row up. Thank you.
I think people feel more comfortable, relaxed. They're themselves. They don't have to pretend.
Yeah, exactly.
They can express their inner self.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Thank you. That when we start to get to know one another without seeing each other face to face, there's research that shows we let our guard down a little bit. Some have termed it electronic courage. Think about it, right? How many of you remember being on a first date? A little awkward, isn't it? Then you get those moments of silence, like, how's the weather? Right? But when you get to talking over the internet, they could be beautiful, tall, short, dark, light, it doesn't really matter. You start to get at the heart of what really matters. You start to talk about your values. You start to talk about your goals, your aspirations, what's important to you. And it's really interesting. What we find is, in the same way we see Google groups and things like that growing, it's exactly that reason. People join this group because they have like interests, and right away there's a trust that forms because I know I'm here, and he's here, and she's here, because we're all interested in this. And we start to talk freely, comfortably, just as you said. Okay? So we're experienced with the internet. We're experienced with connecting. I'll just leave it like connecting on the internet. Then why not e-mentoring? Why not? Makes sense to me. So 2 billion people in the world are using the internet regularly. And it's not just in a certain age group. In fact, the most recent research shows the fastest growing group is the plus 70s. believe it or not, as a percentage. Pardon?
Those are out space.
I'm sorry.
Those are not immigrants, they are out space.
Well, the idea is, you know, again, it's comfortable, it's in their room, it's easy to get to, right? But the highest growth per capita, per demographic group, is in the 70 and overs. So it's, you know, it's not just for the people that you see on a day-to-day basis. And then, you know, again, this idea of, well, why not? Why not have e-mentoring? It makes a whole lot of sense. Within an organization, as I mentioned, those that are spread out, this gives an opportunity for people within these dispersed organizations to connect with one another, to share best practices, to learn from one another. And not only that, but here's another interesting thing. In organizations that have mentoring programs, and as I said, sometimes they target women and minorities, what happens when you see in the lunchroom an attractive young female sitting with an older male executive? Do you think people whisper and talk? I wonder how she got that promotion. I'm not trying to be mean, and I'm not trying to discount that mentoring works. What I'm saying, unfortunately, and again, we know this from the research, is that people have perceptions. They may be completely inaccurate, but that doesn't matter, because my perception's my reality. And if I am looking over there and thinking, this is not okay, this is not legitimate, I don't believe this is real mentoring, I think he's doing her a favor because there's something going on behind the scenes, my behavior is going to match my perceptions, and it's damaging to the mentor, it's damaging to the protege, and it's damaging to the organization. So here's another interesting benefit of this online relationship. You can have a senior male and a junior female having all sorts of advice going back and forth, and nobody's the wiser. So it's really interesting that this is not only, you know, more convenient, but it also takes the whispering out of what goes on in organizations around formal mentoring programs. We have a question.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. The body language is taken out of the context.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, some research was saying 80%, 70% of communication comes across. Okay.
You're right. So let me comment on that. Again, remember what I said. I am not here to tell you get rid of all your traditional mentors and replace them with virtual ones. There are advantages and disadvantages of both. And you're absolutely right. Sure, when we're communicating online, sending emails back and forth, we miss out on so much, right? We miss out on the intonation, the inflection, the chance for immediate feedback. I didn't understand what you said. Could you say more? We don't have that opportunity, and the gestures, right? So this is a problem. It's not as rich, absolutely. However, at the same time, there are some other benefits that you get. You know, we're not so worried. We're a little bit more courageous. We're a little bit more willing to ask the tough questions when we're not saying, oh my goodness, I'm sitting across from the CEO. What do I do? What do I say? What if I stutter? What if I sweat? What if I, right? So neither is perfect. But if we look at our career goals in general and think about how mentors, plural, in our network can help us achieve what we want, we can have different sorts of mentors. Some that are virtual, some that are face-to-face. So you're absolutely right. Again, I'm not saying dispense with all of your traditional mentors, but there are things that you get virtually that you don't get face-to-face, and there are things you get face-to-face that you don't get virtually. Fair enough? Great question. Great question. Okay. So here's what we know. There's been very little, but thankfully some research, some empirical research, and I've been a part of this, in terms of virtual mentoring. And the question is, can you really get the same sorts of benefits, the same support, whether it's career support or psychosocial support, when the connection is purely online? We never meet face-to-face. Maybe we meet over Skype and we get to see the body language and we get to hear the inflection, and maybe not. So right now, when we've done what little studies we've done, we've defined virtual as not face-to-face, okay? What we found is that the kinds of functions served, like I said, the career function, the psychosocial function, is there. just as it is traditionally. We have also found that the benefits received, increased network, increased sense of self-efficacy, that I am able to do what it is I need to do, etc. And I'll show you a slide in a moment. But there are differences. Again, some are, better and worse. But because this word CMC stands for computer-mediated communication. When we communicate via the computer, there are things that we have found in the research which are kind of counterintuitive. That we are more able and more comfortable to disclose and share when we're behind the screen than when we're face to face. So for example, if I did a presentation and I failed miserably, I used the wrong data, I misspoke, and I'm sitting across from my mentor, how comfortable do you think I feel telling him about all of my mistakes? But if instead I said, well, today was a challenging day, I started out okay, and then right? So there's a certain amount of comfort to be able to do that online. And you think about the old emails that you've sent. And again, because we're not distracted, right? Oh, he's cute, she's attractive. Wow, I didn't realize his voice was so deep. Gee, hers is so squeaky. All that stuff's irrelevant when you're reading words on a page. And you're just getting right into the facts, right into the real meat of what is happening in the exchange of information in a mentoring relationship. And as I mentioned before, this is particularly important for people in underrepresented categories, as well as shy people. I used to teach networking. And to some people, the idea of walking up to a stranger in an elevator and introducing themselves, they'd rather die. They'd rather die. Okay, you know who I'm talking about, right? It's not you. I know, it's not you, right? So for some people, the idea of networking and introducing themselves to strangers is just absolutely foreign. I could never do that, etc. And so what's nice about this mechanism is it could be the entree. It could be the start. And once the comfort has built up, then we can have these conversations face to face. We're seeing the growth of organizations actually implementing online programs within or augmenting their regular programs. There are some examples there. And think about it this way. You create a database. You have several fields like country of origin, country of current work, education experience, interests, etc. And you have the similar fields for the proteges. People can go online and say, oh, Mark sounds like a good connection for me. Let me send him an email. And just as the example with Ole, if I send Ole an email and say, wow, I didn't realize you've done so much for our company. Do you mind if I send you an email every now and again to get your advice? Of course, he'll say, it's an honor, yes? Okay. Also, for a world that is very concerned about, right, if I can't measure it, it doesn't exist, with that electronic connection to everybody, instant way of downloading and getting all those results. It's working or it's not. Here's what we find. So there's some beauty of this mentoring program being online. And here's another interesting thing. Going back to the comment the gentleman 5 seats back there in the white shirt made, we're a busy people, right? We don't have time to get in our cars, to drive to the coffee shop, to have this conversation, to drive back. I can pick up the phone, ask him a question, and get an instant answer to my question. So the time investment for me, the protege, and you, the mentor, is minimal. And I get exactly what I need when I need it. And if he's busy and doesn't answer the phone, I send him an email. And while he's waiting for the second leg of his plane to take off, he sends me an answer. Brilliant, right? Okay? So this is great. And as I said, I won't bore you with the research. I want to leave some more time for some questions. But what we've found, and there's more, granted, this is a study using MBA, fully employed students. These are not the real world. And you can argue about that, and you have a valid argument. But what I will say is, in this, one of the very first studies that is testing what people are getting from only virtual communication with their mentor, all this stuff is happening. And because I've run these exercises or these relationships before, I have a little bit of feedback to share with you. This is undoctored feedback from the people themselves that have participated in this kind of a relationship. This gentleman here is Dick Graham. He's a CEO, actually he's retired recently, he's the CEO of an award-winning medical center in Virginia in the United States. And I know you can read as well as I can, but the thing that I find very funny about this one comment was when the student asked him certain questions about hospital policies, Dick reflected on it and said, you know, you're right. That's an FHP, a future historic policy. I thought that was great because nobody had asked him the question. Perhaps nobody was bold enough to say, why do we do this in the hospital? And on reflection, he said, we shouldn't. Let's get rid of it. So benefits for the mentor as well as benefits for the protege. And you know, here's another mentor who participated in an online program who said, it was great to be able to share these words of wisdom. It's a good feeling. And it's interesting, culturally speaking, different cultures have different values toward the people who are getting on in their years and on in their careers and leaving. In the United States, where I come from, we don't care. That's my opinion. But they retire, we give them a nice party, and we say, nice to know you. And in other cultures, I'm exaggerating only slightly, in other cultures, there's much more veneration of those who have been around and amassed a lot of knowledge. So there's so much out there. Why don't we avail ourselves of it? And let's do it in a way that is convenient. So I just showed you an example from the mentor. Here's an example from proteges. I love the second one here. I had a protege start to connect with and have conversations with a mentor, and she sent me an email. I'm sorry, I must withdraw from your class. In this conversation, I was offered an opportunity that's going to cause me to travel so much that I'm sorry, I won't be able to take your class anymore. I was okay with that. But you know, you never know what could happen when you open your mind to the fact that mentoring is not just two people sitting across from each other having a coffee together, that there's a lot that can be accomplished virtually. And this is another one that we hadn't talked about. You know, again, if I'm sitting across from the CEO and I'm a shy person or a nervous person, I might not get the words out well, or I might not construct a really good question that's going to cause me to get a really deep response. But when I sit at my computer and I wordsmith and I spell check and I think through what is the best way to ask this question to get the richest response, you do. And you get a written version of it to go back and refer to. It's quite lovely, actually. This is a lot of words. If you want to read them, you may. But this is an example of a student who was working on her PhD in chemical engineering. And 3M had a program where they tried to connect their company with schools who had engineering programs. And so the mentoring process actually began from school to the workplace. And in this case, this student got so much out of this relationship, she eventually wound up joining 3M. So you don't really think about it necessarily as a recruiting tool, but more and more companies are starting to look not just at the current environment, who's in here and how can we help them, but to look at the feeder process and say, maybe we should be connected to some of the top schools of engineering where it's hard to get the talent and develop the talent. So again, there's a lot of stuff there. Do you want me to leave it up for another minute to read it? Or shall I? No, okay. Just getting some body language here. So what I want to say, I don't want to say in final, but there's also an article that is in your iPad that you can read. The bottom line for virtual mentoring is that there are a lot of benefits. It's not just virtual, these are real benefits. And these things that we've talked about, the fact that you avoid the gossip, you get what you need without people whispering in the corners about, I wonder what's really happening over there. And as I mentioned, there's this comfort and electronic courage and a willingness to self-disclose, which then breeds trust and increases the value of the advice for both parties that happens when you're not distracted by all those demographic cues and differences. The fact that we mentioned before that the time horizon, right? I could instantly sit down at my computer, send an email, get a response shortly, which is fantastic. I don't have to get in my car and go somewhere and fight the traffic or get on a plane, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives us the freedom to live our lives and still get what we need. And the fact that, we used to talk about the digital divide. I'm not so convinced we're divided anymore. I mean, of course, there are those who don't have access, but now we have the $100, $200 PC. So, there's a lot of opportunity out there. How many of you would say that maybe you hadn't thought about it before, but if you think about what we talked about, you are in a virtual mentoring relationship right now? Fantastic. How many of you are now thinking that you might want to be